The retail death march persists. Retail businesses of all sizes in America have been facing an unprecedented crisis for more than a decade. The past couple of years have accelerated the demise of many companies, pushing them into bankruptcy, while others, with no hope for rehabilitation, just went out of business abruptly. But the storm that is brewing all across the sector right now may be unlike anything we've ever seen. A flood of bankruptcies is expected within 6 months, and according to data provided by the U.S. Chamber of Commerce, almost half, or 47% of U.S. retailers may not be able to survive another recession. At this point, thousands of celebrated American brands are saddled with massive debt loads, depressed profit margins, falling sales, and declining foot traffic. And before we notice, many of them may close their doors forever. That's why today we have compiled a list of 20 companies that may vanish during the downturn that is intensifying all across the country. Before moving on, please support our work with a thumbs up, and don't forget to subscribe to our channel. Without further ado, let's check this list. 1. Big Lots. According to Motley's Fool, Big Lots is in a big hole. Even though some discount stores had a great performance in the period of rampant inflation, rising gas prices, and higher interest rates, with consumers turning to deep discounters to stretch their dollars further, that wasn't the case for Big Lots. The discount home furnishings retailer is widely missing Wall Street sales and earnings expectations. Its net sales tumbled 15.4%, leading to a loss of $11.1 million in a single quarter, a major hit considering it operates on paper-thin profit margins. Unfortunately for Big Lots, it doesn't see the situation improving anytime soon and will again lose money in the next quarter, analysts wrote. CEO Bruce Thorne said, "We believe the slowdown was caused by the spending pressure our consumers felt from higher gas prices and broader inflation, which is affecting discretionary spending across the retail industry. We felt the early brunt of this due to our lower-income customers being the most immediately affected. Needless to say, this trend is only just beginning, which means big trouble for the chain." 2. Farfetch. Luxury goods retailer Farfetch has already seen its stock shares crash by 89% within 2 years. But unfortunately, financial strategists still see harder times ahead. According to Seeking Alpha analysts, the imminent recession is highly problematic for Farfetch. In terms of recession, people lose jobs, run out of money, and generally drop discretionary income. As a result, the coming 24 months are at risk for Farfetch to be incredibly difficult, coupled with sluggish revenue growth. A layer of complexity here is inflation. It is already eroding people's discretionary income with the cost of living crisis in many Western economies. This means that the problems for Farfetch have already begun, and the times to come will only get worse, they noted. 3. Neiman Marcus. The luxury department store chain faced one of the largest bankruptcy proceedings of 2020. With a $4 billion debt load that had been growing since 2013, plus $200 million in annual interest, the sudden decline in sales after the pandemic broke out after the company was unable to pay its gigantic debt as profit margins dropped to the lowest levels in a decade. At the time of filing, all of the retailer's locations had been closed and most of its 14,000 employees had been furloughed. In 2021, it re-emerged from bankruptcy and 36 of its stores reopened. Although the retailer introduced a whole new business model, more focused on its digital footprint, the success of its rebranding is still being threatened by the economic downturn that is now unfolding. Just like Farfetch, given that sales of luxury goods are some of the first to be postponed during recessions, this will be translated into more financial distress for the brand in the coming months. 4. StubHub. The American ticket exchange and resale company made its entrance into the brick-and-mortar retail industry in 2017, a time when things started to go downhill for thousands of retail businesses. But the greatest blow faced by the company came in 2020, when virtually all live events were canceled, and the company was forced to refund millions of tickets to buyers before recouping the same refund from the seller. The retailer also faced a series of lawsuits from fans who say they never got their refunds, despite the company's refund policy. StubHub furloughed most of its staff, around 300 people. The crisis also came at a time that StubHub's $4 billion buyout from Viagogo was halted by courts in February. Since then, the company never recovered, and in September 2021, it agreed to pay $9.5 million to end the refund investigation. From that point on, StubHub has been on the bankruptcy watch list as it has lost the trust of its customers. Industry analysts say that only a full rebranding could save the business, but after so many scandals, creditors do not seem so sure that it would be worth it. 5. WeWork. The co-working space company dived into retail in 2018, rapidly becoming a staple in the nation's shopping malls. Then, social distancing measures required the shutdown of several WeWork locations during the peak of the health crisis, and the rise of remote work, which allowed people to work from home or any other place they wanted to, means that the need for co-working space is rapidly fading away. But before that, WeWork was already in disarray. In September 2019, co-founder and former CEO Adam Neumann stepped down after reports of his chaotic management style surfaced and a planned IPO was scrapped. Neumann sued WeWork's new owner, SoftBank, after it announced it would no longer purchase stock from Neumann and others. Over the past couple of years, the company's occupancy dropped by nearly 2/3, and the beginning of a new recession is likely to push the commercial real estate broker over the edge. 6. Steak and Shake. The beloved restaurant chain has been closing stores since 2019, when the company reported an operating loss of $18.6 million. Facing declining sales, the burger chain already closed over 100 locations to convert them into counter-service-only restaurants to save on labor costs associated with having a waiting staff. It managed to avoid bankruptcy in 2021 after a new lender paid $102 million of its $220 million loan debt. But in 2022, it might not be so lucky. Steak and Shake is now seen as a bankruptcy risk because of its restaurant closures over the past couple of years and the resulting lost cash flow, as well as the struggles associated with operating during the health crisis and the coming maturity of its remaining $118 million debt load. 7. The Paper Store. This northeastern chain selling stationery, ornaments, and other giftable items filed for Chapter 11 bankruptcy in July 2020, blaming pandemic-related store shutdowns. But the Paper Store is on the list of companies that emerged from bankruptcy only to fall into distress once again. Due to a series of issues with its restructuring plan, the company is now in the process of closing 70 stores from its last 100 stores. Being left with a much smaller retail footprint, the retailer is likely to be crushed by larger competitors as economic conditions continue to tighten in the months ahead. 8. Outer Stuff. The maker of Major League Sports apparel for youth is one of the several apparel retailers struggling to stay in business. With $255 million in debt, the company is at risk of default as it has an unsustainable capital structure at current levels of performance, small revenue scale, narrow product concentration primarily in licensed children's sports apparel in North America with a small adult and international presence, and reliance on licensing arrangements from several sports leagues for a significant majority of revenue. Moody's Analytics explained. According to Business Insider, the retailer may be a fatal victim of the next wave of bankruptcies that is on the horizon. 9. Radio Shack. Radio Shack isn't dead yet, but it might be soon. The once ubiquitous electronics retailer emerged from its second bankruptcy in 2017, but today it's a mere shell of its former self. The chain had about 5,200 stores and 27,500 employees in 2014. Today, only 400 stores are still open, and they all belong to independent owner Retail E-commerce Ventures. As Americans continue to turn to online shopping, the remaining stores are going from a strategic benefit to an expensive burden. Even though Radio Shack still lives online with a significantly slimmer catalog, analysts at the Associated Press warned there is substantial doubt it can stay in business for another year. 10. Talbots. Women's clothing store Talbots is among apparel retailers at risk of closing doors for good. The company is facing sector challenges as many consumers have turned away from malls over the past couple of years. Right now, Talbots still doesn't have much cash on hand, and its $185 million debt is coming due soon, increasing the potential of going under. It recently announced the closure of several locations and distribution centers and the layoff of 275 employees. 11. Teavana. In 2017, Starbucks announced the closure of 379 Teavana stores after years of underperforming sales. However, mall operator Simon Property Group sued Starbucks and managed to keep 77 mall-based stores open. A year after that, Starbucks and Simon eventually reached a settlement, allowing the remaining stores to close. But yet, a dozen locations still survived and can be found in some big box stores around the country. However, the company's product range is very limited compared to what it used to be, and the lack of floor space and appropriate food service equipment suggests that its operations are faltering again. All signs suggest that may be only a matter of time before it disappears from our retail landscape for good. 12. The Limited. Once a mall stalwart, this well-known fashion retailer went bankrupt at the beginning of 2017 and closed all of its roughly 250 stores. A year after, Southern department store chain Belk purchased the brand and relaunched it as a private label. But Belk's recent bankruptcy, soaring debt, and negative earnings outlook for the rest of 2022 mean that the days of the Limited may be counted. 13. Shoes for Cruise. Owned by SHO Holding, the company extended the deadline for its debt maturity last year. Still, the maker of slip-resistant safety footwear for workers is at risk of default as it faces the continued challenges of the apparel industry and is strapped with debt, according to an analysis recently released by Business Insider. The company is teetering on the edge of bankruptcy, worsening economic conditions, and the closing of several store chains to which it provides its products are likely to hit the retailer's finances hard as we move toward 2023. 14. Board Riders. The maker of popular surfing, skateboarding, and snowboarding apparel brands like Billabong and Roxy went bankrupt for the first time in 2015, and now it's at risk of going under again as the company faces slower foot traffic and a lot of debt amid the ongoing consumer recession, Moody's said. The company has seen almost $500 million in sales losses in the last quarter of 2021, leaving it with weak cash flow throughout much of 2022. Due to its poor credit rating, it's on the top of the list of companies at risk of default in the fourth quarter. The holiday season can either save the company or put the last nail in the coffin for this once celebrated brand. 15. Joanne. The financial situation of the fabrics and arts and crafts retailer doesn't look good. Joanne has been grappling with declining sales, higher costs, and greater cash flow volatility this year. Even after the economy reopened, foot traffic at Joanne stores remains 50% lower than what it used to be. It recently got a credit downgrading from S&P 500, and it's expected to close over 45 stores in the near future. The business is already strained by tariff-related cost pressures as well as competitive forces. Its small retail presence is not enough to withstand this pressure, in our view, the analyst said. On top of that, with credit markets strained from the gathering economic downturn, there is much uncertainty around refinancing. So, the declining and distressed Joanne retailer could be in for yet a rougher time as the country navigates through another slowdown. 16. 99 cents only. Dollar store chain 99 cents only is slowly dying before our eyes. It still operated about 350 stores across 4 states, but it's been accumulating distressed loans since 2017. The pile of troubled debt outstanding expanded by about $12.6 billion as record inflation has taken a toll on the chain. According to Bloomberg, the discount retailer's presence in the industry is endangered by a competitive disadvantage compared to larger chains, as well as a series of operational and execution issues. Given that net profits plunged by 88%, don't be surprised if the company starts announcing layoffs and store closures in the near future. 17. Gymboree. In 2019, kids' clothing seller Gymboree filed for bankruptcy for the second time and closed more than 800 stores all across the nation. Its lower-priced brand, Crazy 8, also shut down all of its locations. The first filing happened in 2017 and resulted in 375 store closures. In 2021, the brand has reappeared in some malls and select Children's Place stores, but they may not last very long though. Disappointing sales and foot traffic are leading the retailer to liquidate its inventory and keep its operations online. 18. Kirklands. Kirkland stores sell furniture, holiday decor, wall decor, textiles, art, decorative accessories, mirrors, art, fragrances, and many other products. But even as we enter the all-important holiday season, the outlook for Kirkland's doesn't seem reassuring. Since 2021, the company is watching net sales and comparable sales dip, and in its last quarter, it reported an 8.6% drop in revenue to $115 million and a net loss of $25.7 million. That's partly because the retailer closed 5% of its stores in the past 24 months, and many more are expected as it fails to meet investors' earnings expectations. 19. Brookstone. This much-loved purveyor of gadgets and gizmos first filed for bankruptcy in 2018, a decision that led 101 mall-based stores to close. But you still have options if you really must visit the store one last time. About 30 locations remain open at airports after the chain was bought by the Chinese investment firm Sailing Capital. But as airports were closed in 2020 and decaying economic conditions were translated into fewer people flying, the company has been coping with declining sales and foot traffic, which led to the shutdown of 5 locations over the past couple of years. The electronics retailer is already out of the reach of many Americans, and before we notice, it may soon be gone forever. And 20. Revlon. New York-based cosmetics retailer Revlon is one of many in the industry that has faced reduced demand even before the pandemic kept most Americans confined to their homes. Revlon has been struggling with declining revenue and a $575 million debt that ultimately led the company to file for bankruptcy in July. With sales falling 21%, supply chain disruptions and rising operational costs, as well as the rise of influencer cosmetic brands, Revlon is facing major challenges to adapt to today's market. And while rising interest rates continue to tighten borrowing conditions, the future of the company remains uncertain, with lenders still evaluating whether the 89-year-old company deserves more than $500 million to restructure itself. A potentially lackluster holiday shopping season can wreak havoc on the balance sheets of many struggling retailers and to push them off a financial cliff. I think many of these companies will file for bankruptcy, and it's not going to be a handful, it'll be a scary number, said Stifel Managing Director Michael Kalender, who leads the consumer and retail investment banking group Stifel. It's far more than we have seen over the last several years combined, he predicts. Given the fact that many of these businesses are reporting worsening financial problems for many years, we're likely to see major chains and big household names go away and not come back. Consumers are being squeezed on each and every front, and right now there aren't many reasons to be optimistic about the state of our economy. The death of retail represents the death of our middle class and the collapse of our purchasing power. These downward trends will continue to gain force as our financial conditions keep getting weaker. This winter is going to bring unprecedented challenges for all of us, and by 2023, our economic landscape may be much emptier than anyone could have imagined.